Hey guys, B8KD here, and today's video I'm going to be doing a pretty brief overview about how I built my PvP rogue. Now this build is definitely not perfect, and I've watched pretty much zero guides and I've built this myself. This build is very dependent on what gear you have. You need to have pretty high tiered gear to hit for numbers that I'm hitting. This build is fully core dependent, so I'm not overkilling it on the poison, which is a very good build for PvP, but I went a little bit different just because I'm trying to one-shot things. I don't want poison ticking down and people out healing it or anything. I want to one-shot people. I want to sneak up with my concealment with poison imbue on, pop them with the twisting blades, and then I have pretty much 3 get out of jail cards. And when my shadow clone goes off, it resets that again. So we're going to start off. First things first, we're going to go over the gear overview. I'm going to have place markers all throughout this video, doing a full overview. So click around on what you want to see. To start off, my gear, I have for my helmet, total armor, basic skill attack speed, poison imbuement has to be 4 ranks for it to be very effective, and cooldown reduction. Now, arguably, you can swap the disobedience for something like eluding. This gives you a unstoppable buff when you become injured, and with that injured, you can pair that with something like, I swap my armor around all the time, but like this, damage reduction while injured, negative 42%. So you can pop a potion and usually not get 2-shot. So I can swap that back and forth, but ideally, instead of basic attack skill speed, you want HP. You want more health pool, and that would be the absolute perfect helm. For the chest and legs, we want full damage reduction as much as we can get. So damage reduction, armor, damage reduction from close enemies. Now you can slip in dodge chance for the all stats, HP, so more health. I haven't been able to replace this one because it's nearly perfect rolls on the close damage reduction. But you always want to slot the 25% less damage from crowd-controlled enemies, paired with the pennant greaves. If they're not unstoppable, it does chill them, and you get that 25% reduction and the bonus movement speed, so that is huge for PvP. Going down to the gloves, critical strike chance, attack speed. You want the attack speed as high as you can get on these. I went with dexterity just because I didn't have anything else, but if you're doing like traps, you can do the reduction to arm speed. And of course twisting blades for your core. Now I'm not too sure what I would switch the dexterity to, but you could really do anything, all stats, dex, or whatever else they have on there. But you need crit, attack speed, and core. Legs are the same way. I really like these legs because it's pretty much all defensive stats. Damage reduction while poisoned because you open up with the poison. Flat damage reduction. Damage reduction while injured is huge. And then dodge chance against close. Paired with my close quarters there, it gives me a very high dodge rate. So sometimes I won't get one shot. Probably 1 out of 5 Hoda barbs could still one-shot me if I don't get the right encounter, or they're too fast and run away before I can slap their cheeks. Gem-wise, in all 3 of these, damage reduction while controlled is impaired. I think that is the best. If you're going for a tank build, that or HP might be good, but if I get CC'd or slowed or anything, that basically kicks in, it's 50%. I'm not sure if it's additive or whatever, but I think that's the best for not getting one shot. Pennant greaves are absolutely huge for DPS. If they're not unstoppable, because I don't think you can chill enemies that are unstoppable. So it completely mitigates the damage. But if you catch somebody with their pants down and they aren't unstoppable, they absolutely slap, paired with the Frigid Finesse there, and we'll go over that. But the 15x damage, there's some other things on the Paragon board that will add to that, but I would go with Pennant Greaves. If you don't have those, I would go with damage reduction while injured, movement speed, and 2 other things like cooldown reduction or energy cost reduction on the boots if you don't have them. Now for the crossbow, you want core, vulnerable, dex, and the last one you could go with damage to close. You can go with damage to poison or all stats, but do not go with crit damage on that. I do have a very nice crossbow down here with crit damage, but you want to make sure your crit damage is 150-ish. That is the sweet spot before it's either diminished or not applied at all. So 150 crit damage. If you put that on, I'm at 210, and I'm basically wasting 54 crit damage versus I get 55 close damage to close enemies. Down here, I did the Twisting Blades, gives, that standard Twisting Blades one. Now for Hoda Barbs, usually because the Pennant Greaves don't affect them if they're unstoppable. So what I chose over the extra shadow step, which I don't need the extra shadow step at this point, and I'll explain that why shortly, but I have a max rolled unstoppable exploiters chain. So it gives you a 20% crowd control duration, which is very minor in PvP, but you deal 75% X damage to Hoda Barbs pretty much, or anybody unstoppable. Absolutely slaps their cheeks. Now I would go with energy cost, damage reduction, and movement speed. You can swap damage reduction for DPS if you want, but I'm still struggling. Sometimes I get one shot by people. I like the extra damage reduction. Now, I would go with Weapon Mastery or Imbuement, or you can do Weapon Mastery and Imbuement. I have a very good necklace down here that gives me Frigid Finesse and Imbuement. But the Frigid Finesse doesn't apply all the time, so I think Weapon Mastery in PvP is the best choice, along with the Imbuement, just for the extra poison damage. But I am trying to slap as hard as I can with my Twisting Blades on that. Armor is good, but usually you're not like going after them for a long time and fighting them, and if we are, this is really kicking in and giving us the armor we need. So I would probably skip armor on that unless you're stacking armor. Now, the other choice, which once we go into the abilities, Momentum passive key gives you 358 HP per second. Now, when it has 3 stacks, it gives over 1,000 HP per second, which is huge. But sometimes it's hard to keep it up because I think you have to stun or daze or hit them from behind to keep queuing that up. But this is a fun necklace to play with. But overall, I found that the Unstoppable is the best damage to Unstoppable. Down here, for our rings, ideally, you want crit chance, vulnerable, crit damage if you haven't hit the 150 yet. But you can swap that to poison damage or anything else, and you definitely want life on both of your rings. You need a little bit of survivability. I'm only at 10 or 11k right now, but that's as good as it's going to get. Now I have a crit chance, life, poison, and vulnerability. This is the absolute perfect ring for PvP in my opinion. Now, for the imprint, I did the 8% dodge versus damage over time, and you get 10 resource. Doesn't give much primary resource back, but I feel like that is one of the best things to choose. just for that slot. Now you can change that because it's yeah, it's negotiable that you can do that. The best thing to do in PvE is to do the 4 primary resource, the umbral there, but I don't always use that for PvP. I've been messing around with Opportunist. When you break stealth, you drop a cluster of exploding stun grenades. It doesn't do too much damage, and it stuns them, but it helps you catch people with their pants down, and this ring has physical damage on it and no crit chance, so this is pretty good. Physical damage does go with your twisting blades and makes it hit like a truck. So I've been playing with that one, but this is a negotiable slot too. You can put something else there that you feel might fit you better. Down at the blades, we want to do core damage. So the obsidian or expectant, I don't even know what the name of this is, but attack enemies with your basic skill increases your next core damage. This is called snapshotting. So you want to go out and throw a few of your blades at the enemies, get that built up to 3, and then stop attacking. That will give your first attack out of stealth a 30x amount of damage. Same thing with your blades. You want vulnerable damage, dex, all stats, crit strike chance if you haven't hit 150. You can do close, cutthroat damage, shatter damage, whatever comes on there. For the other blade, skill steal up to 20% increased damage based on your primary resource. I may switch this out, but it's very good for your first attack, and then usually the rest of the fight I'm teetering on the 10 to 20% resource, so we're not getting too much effect from that. So we'll put that on. What else do I have here? So I play around sometimes. If I get one shot by a Hoda Barb, I will switch my legs with the dodge chance and all that extra bonuses on there with the barrier. Sometimes that stops it. And then also the basic skills grants 20% damage reduction. That's pretty good. So I switch these legs around all the time, and I haven't really found the perfect one yet, but it has to be defensive usually. But yeah, that's about what my gear looks like. You want skulls in the jewelry, and then vulnerable damage in the weaponry. You don't want the CC sapphires, because if you're not CCing somebody that's unstoppable, you're not applying that extra damage. But yeah, that is all of the gear so far. Next up, we are going to go into abilities, and I'll show you how I have this set up. Very briefly, fundamental puncture. We always have improved twisting blades for the days. It is pretty essential to have the 3 out of 3 in siphoning strikes. I always have 3 out of 3 close damage. We need the stun, methodical shadow step. Down here, I only have 1 point in each of these, but critically strike. A dazed enemies knocks them down. I'm not always knocking people down, but sometimes if they don't have any CC break, you can just stun lock them over and over again pretty much. Weapon mastery, I have that amulet that gives me +3, and then I have 3 ranks already in it, so it's a 18x increased damage. Daggers will fit very well in this slot too, because it gives 30x increased damage to healthy enemies, which will be very good for coming out of stealth and one-shotting them. I do have the use a cooldown, get 12% dodge chance. Dodge is very powerful in PvP. That can save your life from being one-shot, and if a Hoda Barb is like half fury, he can't one-shot you after that. I went with Concealment, and you always want the guaranteed critical strike chance. I did Exploit for the healthy and injured. This helps you finish people off and potentially get a very nice one-shot with the stealth. I only had 1 point left for this, so I just put 3x damage. If you are poison built, I would recommend probably doing the increased poison damage. Poison enemies deal 15% less damage. Same thing, blended poison imbuement. Shadow clone here. This grants you on your second point unstoppable for 5 seconds. This makes it so CC effects that give like, let's just look on here. So damage to crowd-controlled enemies. Sometimes people that have that on their Paragon board, when you pop that, sometimes you won't get one-shot by one-shotting barbs or druids and stuff because they can't apply that additional damage. So that's kind of a break yourself out of CC and stay alive. Let's see, down here I did the, while moving, increased energy regeneration just to get to the 3 out of 3 because you get bonus movement speed while you're above 50%, and movement speed is huge in PvP. And then also below 50% you get a maximum energy, 15% increased attack speed, so you actually slap some cheeks when you're a little bit lower. Now with that necklace I was showing you, the momentum, that pairs very well with this because if you can get the 3 stacks, you get increased movement speed, energy regeneration, and damage reduction. Sometimes I'll swap that out if I want to stay alive or be more tanky. But with the close quarters combat, this is absolutely huge. You do massive crits with this and you get a ton of attack speed. So I'd recommend usually going close quarters combat for the one shot. Specialization, I always have preparation on, so I pop my shadow clone and these 3 abilities refresh. That gets you basically 2 get out of jail cards and more damage. You can do combo points and snapshot them with that ability I was showing you right here as well. You can get 3 combo points and 3 stacks of this and do massive damage, but I found sometimes I don't kill people right off the snap, and it's almost better having the preparation and being able to reset all my cooldowns. Alright, so that's it with the skill trees. Some of these are negotiable and you can move them around a little bit. If you don't need as much damage, you can move that over here. Now this build in my Paragon board that we'll go over in a second, you can change this so you do poison trap and death trap so you can PvE, and I can do up to level 75 sigils just about, and 65 very easily. So you just have to move a few things around. Poison trap, that, and then I typically would move some other stuff around, but so yeah. Let's go into the Paragon board. I'm going to be very brief with this on how I hit everything. I have basically no tank nodes other than this one board right up here, and I'll get into that. But I didn't really hit any HP or anything. I took armor if it was like 1 point away. Pretty much we want the life and damage. We got the critical strike with core. The second board up here is the Deadly Ambush. This is a negotiable board. You can take this off. I keep it on because I need the 0.5 second reduction to trap time so I can still PvE with this board. But you can change this if you'd like, because you do 23x critical strike damage to affected enemies, and we don't have any traps with this build. So it's kind of just for the cutthroat damage there. You can get up to 60 dex points on this little board here, and that's 79% cutthroat skill damage. You also get a reduction to melee damage, so that's pretty huge just with that glyph. Damage reduction by enemies affected by traps, not really using that. So this board, if you are building this out, you can remove this one for something else if you're all PvP. This one is also negotiable. You get a 5x damage for crowd control enemies. You're not always crowd controlling if they're unstoppable, but basically you get a lot of damage for crowd controlled, and if you are able to crowd control them with the Pennant Greaves there, it is absolutely huge damage. Core damage here, damage to close, and damage reduction. We are not on the board we're just looking at, but right here we have efficacy, or whatever it's called. You get a imbuement skill effect, and it boosts your rare nodes, which gives you a ton of damage reduction from slowed and controlled damage. You can just see that there. Okay, we'll skip down. We got this board, Exploit Weakness. This is pretty big, especially for long fights. 15 times damage when you hit them multiple times. Vulnerable damage reduction. Vulnerable damage, 20%. That is a huge DPS boost. We have Exploit here on our first hit. We come down on this board. We have a little bit of armor. Damage to close. We have a damage reduction to close, so we're just going over, and a 67%. You can change this to something like more poison damage if you want. Also put snare in there if you're doing trap damage. So this one is very negotiable, but I like the damage reduction in close. And we come down to our last board. We have damage to elites and crowd controlled enemies, which you're not always crowd controlling, and if they're chilled or slowed, you do 10x damage to them, so that's absolutely huge. But I found barbarians sometimes are immune to some of these effects, so you don't get the damage from it. But the big one on the Tricks of the Trade board, you want to hit like an absolute truck, so you do the Cutthroat and Marksman's skill damage. That's pretty big there. I'm going to show you all the glyphs that you can potentially use. We'll get these all to level 15 if you can. Most of mine are all 21. Snare, Turf, leveling up Bane, Tracker. Frost Feeder I found isn't a very good glyph, so let's skip that one. And then I'm working on Pride to mess around with that a little bit. Alright, so that is the Paragon board down. It's not perfect, and you can change one or two boards out to be even more perfect. But essentially what I do is I'll pop my Poison Imbuement, throw a few daggers. I got my 30 core. Let's just ride around, and we're probably not going to find anybody right now, but I'll just show you for example. We'll see somebody trying to extract at the altar. Let's just pretend it's that guy. We'll hop off before he sees us. Concealment, run in, and right click. Pop him off. Now you can pop your Shadow Clone. That helps you kill him. Reset all my cooldowns, and I'm about to die, so I can conceal and run off there. It's pretty simple, but that's how I built this rogue, and it is very effective against one-shotting barbs. You do have to get the upper hand. If they come after you, you need to kind of just stealth and run off until they're unstoppable, either stops, and you can shadow step in and start slapping their cheeks. But that's about all I have for my build. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. I can try to answer them for you. This build definitely isn't perfect. It is very gear dependent, like I was saying, but that's how you build a concealment rogue. These things down here are very important. Shadow step breaks you out of unstoppable, and you can stun them. Poison Imbuement is your big damage over time effect, especially in the Field of Hatred. You get a 20% damage over time boost So poison rogues are very effective. And for this build, I am very core dependent because I want to hit like a truck, but they pair up very nicely together. Concealment is also unstoppable and gives you movement speed and gives you that guaranteed crit out of concealment. And then, of course, Shadow Clone, remember, is the unstoppable for 5 seconds. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully I answered some of your questions, and I'm going to rebuild this rogue into something a little bit different before the new season, and potentially try out a tank built rogue with 20k plus HP, and I'll let you know how that comes out. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.